Hello YouTube. Today I wanted to share with you guys some of my nullsec mining fits that I use to mine ice, merc, and various rocks in nullsec. I want to share these fits because some of you guys have asked in my how to calculate how much ISK I'm making video, what kind of fits I'm using, and that one. And also my HiSec mining video also yields similar questions. These fits would also be viable in HiSec when applicable because they are also max tank, just like the nullsec fits. So nullsec and HiSec has one thing in common: you do want to fit as much tank on your ship. Um, for the reason in high sec is that you want to deter gankers and have as much EHP as possible, and the reason being in nullsec because rats like to shoot your ship, and if you get caught, you want to buy as much time as possible or be able to self rep or save your Hulk if it does get caught. And since the Requel has remote reps on it, at least mine does now, it's actually possible to save a Hulk that gets caught by something like, I don't know, a random couple of assault frigates coming into your site, catching a Hulk, and you can now get your Hulk to your Recoil, stuff it in the ship, and then warp the pod off, which is something that is quite common, actually. You'd be surprised how often Hulks get caught. But the lack of concern of price is because, or at least nullsec, you don't care about price because they're going to get caught or they're not. You just want them to do their job. In high sec, you care about price because if you fly an expensive ship, it's going to become a target. Whereas in nullsec, something shows up in local, all the Hulks just go to tether, and then you deal with the Rookwall getting caught because Hulks go off grid, they go hide, Rookwall gets caught. That's the idea. But if you get caught not paying attention or whatever, your Hulk's gonna get caught. So it's nice to have some tank on them. Anyways, Hulks are cheap. High sec and null sec, they are cheap. You pay for them, you lose them. It happens. It's part of the game. Anyways, without further ado, let's go on game. I have here 3 Hulk fittings. I have 1, 2, 3. I'm in one right now. First, we'll go over the Mercoxit fitting. It is unique because Mercoxit actually has a rig available called the Medium Mercoxit Mining Crystal Optimization, and this rig gives a mining amount bonus of 16%, which is insane. And I didn't know about this for like my first 2 months in nullsec, and when I learned about this, I had to buy a bunch of new Hulks. It was awesome. Anyways, it uses modulated deep core strip miners, and then you don't have an ore option for Mercoxit. It's one of the most valuable minerals in the game. However, you are unable to not have waste while mining it. You always, or my corp and my group and where I live, we're required to use type A's to mine the Mercoxit. 10 of these will one-shot a Mercoxit rock. So that's a thing that I live with. And this is why I say that once you hit a certain number of alts or a certain size of mining fleet, when you go to mine Mercoxit, 100% uptime on the Mercoxit rocks is impossible because you spend a lot of time warping from belt to belt to collect all the Mercoxit rocks because you one-shot them. So 100% efficiency isn't quite possible with these. However, in the mid slots, we have 2 medium shield extenders and then 2 compact multi-spectrum shield hardeners and then 3 mining laser upgrades. And I believe the other rig is a medium processing overclock unit. Because some of my pilots have poor skills, this allows me to fit CPU. And then I just have as much tank as I can get on them. This is around 37,000 EHP. This isn't a very tanky boy, but with the fluid nature of the ship, warping from belt to belt all the time, they're not always in the same spot. They don't get descanned as fast, so they're not as high of a risk. And then also, they really don't get shot by belt rats. With mining for this, I actually pulled up the Python numbers for you guys so that we can talk about the Python numbers with max boosts. This fit, I didn't bother fitting the rest. I just fitted the yield so I can show you guys. This yields about 73 M3 per second and burns about 27 M3. Or sorry, this, how am I going to word this? This has a 73 M3 per second mining yield or 265 M3 per hour mining yield and will burn or destroy 27.5 M3 per second on average, and 100,000 per hour M3 for actually destroying Mercoxit rather than getting it. So that's the Mercfit and how I fly for harvesting Mercoxit. Next, we'll go over the Rockfit, which is interesting. So it does use my standard Rockfit. We're going to go ahead and exit the simulation here. Uses ore strip miners. This is because wasting valuable ores such as R32, R16, and or R16 and up, I tend to use Tech 2, or not Tech 2, R16 and up, I tend to use ore harvesters because I don't want to waste the rocks. Although I'm allowed to use Tech 2 for R16, I prefer to use ore harvesters. The fitting mentality is very similar to Mercoxit, except we have the rig slots open and we can fit shield extenders. And also, since we're not using crystals on the Requal, we can fit a shield rig. Alternatively, on your Hulk, if you're using a Tech 1 crystals and high sec, you could do the same with your Orca. This yields us a roughly 51,000 EHP tank, which is a lot more. We have 2 multi-spectrum hardeners, and then 2 Caldari Navy medium shield extenders, and then of course the mining laser upgrades. This is very similar mentality to the Mercoxit build, except that we have ore strip miners, and then we keep in our cargo the Tech 2 modulated strip miners in this as well, because there's no rigs that affect these. And anytime that I re-rig a ship, I just buy another hull. And I have 10 of each of the 3 of these, and I'm tempted to buy a 4th just to have an ore harvester and a Tech 2 strip miner variant. However, having the Tech 2 strip miners in the hull is convenient because sometimes you go out to a moon intending to use the ore harvesters, and then you end up using Tech 2. Or you get a jackpot moon you didn't know it was a jackpot, and you bring your modulateds, and having the ability just to switch over to ore harvesters is really nice. Yields for this fit, again, using the implant. If we go back up to PIFA, we expect on the modulated strip miner 2s with Tech 2 crystals. No, that's the Merc one. T2 max yield. We expect 137,000 M3, which means each Hulk is going to bring 493,000 M3 worth of ore, and is going to waste another 310,000. So they go through about 710,000 M3 per hour out of the rock, and they end up getting 490 of that. Where the ore max yield goes down a bit, we end up going with, on the ore swap, trying to get this to pop up here, 360,000 M3 per hour per Hulk, and 0 waste because it's an ore strip miner. So that's a thing that we do. We like the ore strip miners a lot out in nullsec because they only make the Hulk 3 times more expensive. I know that sounds like a lot, but 600 million ISK is not a lot when you are mining with 10 characters. It's not a big deal. So this is why I like ore strip miners so much in nullsec. The third fit that I have for you guys is the ice variant. Ice Hulks are very similar to the Mercoxit ones in that they have a it didn't simulate there, in that they have a rig that increases their efficiency, an ice harvester accelerator, which gives you an additional minus 12% cycle time, and it makes the mine a little bit faster. Ore and Tech 2 ice harvesters mine at the same rate, or very close to the same rate, and they have, yeah, so they mine at similar rates, and in lows, instead of mining upgrades, we have ice harvester upgrades. Using ore harvesters creates less waste. In high sec, I always recommend Tech 2, but here in nullsec, I always recommend ore for ice. And then if you don't want to waste and you don't want to spend the money on ores, you can always use Tech 1. We have a compact multi-spectrum hardeners and a large shield extender. This one's really tight on the power grid CPU, and lower skill point pilots have a hard time fitting it. So I just turn off one of the hardeners on my lower skill point pilots. Nika, if you are on my mouse, I cannot explain to the people what I'm doing. Anyways, with the ore ice harvesters, they've come down in price. It's only like 400 million ISK per Hulk. Ice yield is roughly, Nika, I love you, but it's a bad time to sit on the desk. They mine about 410 rocks per hour because everything is rounded-ish, and we end up with roughly 410,000 M3 per hour. which means that they get 410 bricks of ice per hour, and that's with all like the max boosts and everything. We can then take the video that we did last time, put in these numbers into Orcelessus, and figure out how much ice per hour they make versus the rocks based on the like amount of time that they spend in space and all that. And the tank on this one is very similar at 45,000 EHP. Again, we're missing a rig slot, so we can't quite get that 50,000. And yeah, those are my Hulk fits that I use out here in nullsec, and I use similar fits in highsec for the max yield plus as much tank with max yield as I can get. The idea is to mine as fast as possible. Yes, Mackinaws exist and they sit in the belt for a lot longer, but there's a trick that you can do. I keep these enormous freight containers. Do I have one in my cargo? That's the question. I might not have one in my cargo right now. We keep these enormous freight containers in our mining command ship, and when we land in the belt, we deploy them. And when deployed, they have a 250,000 M3 cargo, which is a lot more than your fleet hangar has, because your fleet hangar only has 40,000 M3 for both the Orca and the Rorqual. But we deploy these cargo containers. We have all the Hulks approach this cargo container, and so they're all sitting on that cargo container, drop their ore in the cargo container. So I think it's every 2 minutes for ore, or every other cycle on mining rocks, you have to empty the Hulk into the cargo container, and then every would it be 3 cycles? 3, 6, 8, 4 cycles with ice, you have to go empty them. 4 or 5 cycles with ice, you have to empty them in the cargo container. It has 250,000 M3, so you can fit quite a bit of ore in it. And then when this starts to get full, you just move it into the Rorqual's mining hold, which is massive. It's actually bigger than this cargo hold. You move it in there and you compress it, and if you're mining ice, you put the compressed ice back in the cargo container and have your hauler come and grab it. If you're mining rocks, you just leave it in the hangar of the Rorqual or the Orca, and you end up with some very, very compressed rocks, and you don't have to constantly be shuffling ore around all the time, and not having to constantly shuffle ore around makes mining a lot easier. So try these enormous freight containers. Packaged at only 2,500 M3, and if you're out mining, I'm sure you're capable of putting 2,500 M3 out in space. It makes mining a lot easier, especially when you're doing it at any kind of scale. I'd say 3 or 4 accounts and higher. These containers become really easy. They're also insanely cheap. They only cost like 500,000 to build if you're building them yourself, and also you can buy them on the market in Cheetos for like $1 million and import a bunch in. But it's up to you how you want to do that. But they are worth the 1 to 3 million or whatever cost to throw them out in space, just to have easier navigation. There are some belts, such as ice, where those ore harvesters will reach the entire belt from the center, and you make good bookmarks. Your fleet can just be in the center of the belt, and you don't even have to move, and you enjoy the mining. You can watch a movie while making however much an hour it is that you make while mining, depending on your number of accounts and what you're mining. But this is my little video on my nullsec mining fits. So Rorquals and Orcas, I don't really want to go into too much advice on them. There's some key parts to them. I'm not going to give you my exact fit, but you want your compressor. I always switch the compressor with the industrial jump portal generator. So I switch those, and then depending on mining, if we're using mining lasers, I keep the equipment preservation loaded. My cat's touching my stream deck. I keep the equipment preservation loaded. If I'm not, I do a shield extension. On a Rorqual, you should always have a panic, a siege module, some kind of remote rep, and either a nuke or smart bomb. Depends on personal preference and kind of what you feel like you're going to run into. The rest of the fit is entirely up to you. It depends on what your Corp Reliance demands. You should have refits in your cargo. So what you see here is not necessarily what you're going to engage with me if you want to kill it. But I have a max tank refit, a max DPS refit, a combat refit. Got a few refits in the cargo ready to go. But the key things is that you have the panic module, pulse activated nexus, invulnerability core, and that you have your siege module. Are the two really like big important things. Having a remote shield booster allows you to save Hulks if they get caught, and rep them when they take DPS from rats. Generally, your Rorqual is working on killing the rats anyways with its drones, because the Rorqual has some fantastic drone DPS. And then the jump portal generator is to move around, of course. But in this slot, I do a random compressor, depending on whatever I'm compressing. So I would put this here, put that there, and then turn that back online when I'm actually in space. And I have my newt as well. Some people prefer a newt in the last slot. Some people prefer a smart bomb. It just depends on what you prefer. That's really all that you need to know about a Rockwell. If you are flying a Rockwell, I also recommend that you have some kind of way to bat phone people when you get caught, because these things don't if get caught, they get when caught. I'll do a more detailed video on what to do when you get caught with a Rockwell and how to handle the stress / excitement of possibly losing your 6 billionist asset, which is always exciting. But it's pretty simple, and they're fairly hard to kill if you do things right. One tip I will leave you with in this video for flying a Rockwell is if you activate this, deactivate this every time. This should be the last thing you do to survive. You should buy yourself as much time as you can before activating your panic module. Panic module is when you have exhausted all your other options. Your cap's empty, you've been running your boosters, your shield's broken, you're in hull, you're about to die, you activate panic, deactivate the industrial core. Always deactivate the industrial core. I'm going to repeat again. If you activate your panic module, deactivate your industrial core. You can reactivate it later if you need to. But I have seen too many Rockwells die because they activate this and don't deactivate this. It's kind of upsetting because you go in to save them and they die because you can't rep them because they're in siege. Siege ships cannot receive reps. Panic makes up for that, which is really cool. Rockwells are the only ships that can use panic, and panic basically makes them really difficult to kill, assuming that under the assumption that you have backup available within 5. I think the base is 3 minutes. I just skilled a 4, so I have a 5.5 minutes on it. But if we show info on this again, you mark the details and then show the little eye again, we'll see the base statistic is reactivation delay is 10 minutes. Where is the base modification? It's 240 seconds. It's not quite that long. But knowing your panic time and knowing knowing that help is on the way is really nice. Anyways, that's the fittings that I recommend for nullsec. Every alliance or group, if you are in nullsec, probably has advised fittings as well. So my fittings aren't necessarily the best fittings for you. Do use your own brain and think about what you're doing before you do it. Make sure that what you're doing is going to work for you, and make sure that you are, more importantly, having fun. I enjoy mining while watching a movie. I'll sit there and mine for like 5 hours and watch 2 or 3 movies. It's great. But I am always glued to local when I am undocked in my Rockwell, mostly because I want to save my hulks. I don't mind a couple things showing up and shooting my Rockwell. It's not a big deal. But I do mind when something scary comes, like 40 bombers. We definitely want to deal with that and get that dead as quickly as possible. But they're not going to kill a Rockwell instantly. And I want to do a more detailed video on what to do if you get caught in your Rockwell. I've been caught 4 times in this particular Rockwell, and I have yet to lose a Rockwell. The only ones that I've seen, the pilot made a big mistake, like leaving their siege on or failing to call for help, are the only ones that I've seen actually die in the space that I live in. It might be different where you live. Do talk to your mining director or whoever helps you to mine. They will know how to properly fit a Rockwell in your space and how to properly call the bat phone or pick up the bat phone. Bat phones are great. They will keep your ship safe, and anytime that you have neutrals in system in nullsec, your hulks need to go to tether. You do not hang out with your hulks to figure out what's going to happen. They should be skittish. Your Rockwell, not so much. Hulks skittish, Rockwell not so much. And then in high sec, it's a little bit different. You end up with suicide gankers. You see them come in your systems. You don't wait to figure out what's going on. The hulks should go to dock up. Or if you are confident that they are not targeting you, you can leave them in space. That's a personal decision, and in high sec, you're generally kind of on your own or in a small group. and your small group can make that decision for yourselves. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I am just going to advise you on how to fly. Anyways, fly fun, continue bringing each other up, and I will see you guys in the next one.